Hi, and welcome back to Tabletop Bob. Today we're going to talk about Madness and Sanity Rules that I'm using in a current Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game of mine. But first, I'd like to invite you all to subscribe to the channel. This is a new channel about Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm creating a lot of content. I'd love to hear your feedback about it. If you subscribe and hit the bell icon, you can get notifications every time I go live with a video. I also do a lot of live streaming. I have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/tabletopbob. I'll put the links in the description. You can watch us stream every Tuesday night for our Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign set in the Icewind Dale region. It's the new book from Dungeons & Dragons. I also started a new campaign, which is a horror-themed campaign we're going to be talking about today. Kicked off last Sunday. That is called Supernatural 20. It is a 5th edition horror campaign that uses one-shots. So every adventure is unique, and you can watch each one. There's no need to catch up because the stories are going to be contained. So let's jump into Madness and Sanity Rules. First things first, let's talk about what sanity is. A quick Google search will tell you that sanity refers to the soundness, rationality, and health of the human mind. Now, why would you incorporate sanity into Dungeons & Dragons? Well, I think the idea of Sanity and Madness works really well if you're trying to make the game a little bit more realistic. If you're running a horror-themed D&D game like I am, then I think it makes perfect sense to use a sanity mechanic. There are going to be some rules for sanity and madness in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 259. So for reference, you could take a look at those pages. But ultimately, those rules are vague and basically just have players make saving throws whenever the DM feels necessary. The DMG gives some alternatives where you could have a 7th ability score called Sanity. You can roll up another stat for it, or if you're using point buy, you add 3 more total points to your point buy, and that way you get a separate ability that's used for this. The text then states that you should basically make a roll on a madness table. There are 3 of them: short-term madness, long-term madness, and indefinite madness. There are a few other alternatives presented in the DMG about how to implement sanity in your game, but I really didn't like the rules as written, so I decided to create my own system. Now, I tried to incorporate what I knew from other games, other tabletop games and RPGs that I've played before, as well as do some research of some other mechanics that work in other RPGs that I haven't played. The Call of Cthulhu RPG really popularized the idea of sanity in an RPG. Researching for my sanity rules that I wanted, I looked at the Call of Cthulhu's version, and while I'm not going to go too much into depth here, it basically gives a stat of sanity, similar to a core ability. Even just seeing a Cthulhu monster could cause sanity damage. For example, a creature could do a d6 insanity damage, but at the end of a combat, if you were to kill the creature, you would gain a d6 back. Now, while that is pretty interesting and a realistic way to approach sanity, I don't think it works too well in D&D. First, it's really baked into the system of Call of Cthulhu. I could probably streamline that and use something similar in D&D, but I think that's a lot of work. And like I said, I don't think it really, because it is not a part of the core system, I don't think I want to have a separate sanity score. Another game I play is the End of the World RPG by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, when attempting any check in that game, you have positive and negative dice that you add to a pool. If you're attempting to save versus some sort of a fear effect, seeing a zombie for the first time, being tortured by aliens, whatever it may be, this basically can build stress. As you roll dice, and if you have negative dice left in your pool, that stress goes to basically damage your mind. Depending on what the check was based on, whether it's one of the stats like logic, willpower, charisma, or empathy, you basically can take damage and effectively die if you take too much of it. But as you do take more mental damage, you become resistant to future sources of stress. And this is something that I wanted to implement in my D&D game. So here's what I came up with, and here are the rules that I'm using in my campaign. I'm going to review the system and then show you a video clip from last week's game so that it gives you a real complete picture of how to use this. Alright, so now let's talk about my sanity rules. You can see here I put sanity as intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throws. When a harrowing event or effect occurs, the players will need to make a sanity saving throw. Now, I call this a sanity check, but it is a saving throw for all purposes, so they can use their proficiency bonus if they are proficient in it. The decision to make a check is up to you, just like the Dungeon Master's Guide kind of suggested. But I do have some more guidelines for you. I decided to use all of the mental abilities rather than just wisdom or even wisdom and charisma. I think wisdom is probably the most common check you'll make. Most fear effects in D&D are wisdom based, but also I do think that sometimes you can suffer madness from charisma or intelligence based events. Like, for example, charisma, if you're betrayed by a friend, or an intimidation, a social intimidation, not just as like a fear effect from a monster or a fear effect from a spell. I think it is worth to use charisma in that situation. And intelligence is probably the one you're going to use the least, and it's hardest to justify when to use it. But I think if you're reading from any sort of cursed tome or cursed book, a disturbing diary entry, I do think intelligence is worthwhile in this situation. If any sort of effect or spell already has a fear effect in it, just go with whatever that original check was based on. So if there's a fear effect and it was charisma, for example, don't make it the sanity save that follows it wisdom. Make it charisma. Make it based on the exact same spell effect or effect that the creature gave off. When I decide to make the players roll, they'll basically roll a saving throw. I usually try to make the DCs a little lower if I'm going to have many checks, or have the DCs be a little harder if I'm only going to have maybe 3 possible sanity checks in the game. You should probably plan these out ahead of time. When I was doing my Mask of the Worms game, I actually decided to write out any possible time that I could make a check, and in game I decided in the moment if it was necessary. I didn't want to, make the rules overly complicated, but again, I had about 3 or 4 checks in the game, and I think 3 to 5 is an appropriate amount with the system per session. Then they have a resistance here. So for every sanity point they get removed, a player can gain resistance to further sanity loss. They basically get a +1 on checks for every point that they've lost at that point. So let's take a look at the chart, and then we'll come back to how to heal sanity. The sanity points are here to the left, so you can see everyone starts at 6. So we start at 6, and you can see the save resistance goes on the other side of it, just kind of corresponds to however many they've lost. Now the madness effects are here in the middle. The first 2 levels don't have any in-game effects, but it's just opportunity for role-playing. Once they get to 4 sanity points, they'll roll on this short-term madness chart. Now this is straight from the DMG. If you wanted to create some more sanity effects and add them to the charts or make your own charts, that also would really work fine. The effect lasts only for 1 minute, though. I decided not to make it D10 minutes for the first level because I do want this to be a slow burn and have them, really experience the sanity from start to finish. Not feel like they're jumping from they were fine 1 minute ago and now all of a sudden for 10 minutes they are paralyzed with fear. Once they get to level 3, they start to have multiple effects. They'll roll on the madness chart again, and that could last for D10 minutes. This is the actual time it suggests in the DMG. Additionally, they're going to roll on the long-term madness chart. Now, the long-term and the indefinite are more like personality flaws that just last for different lengths. I think this is more fun to roleplay. That's why it's okay to have all of these stacking, as you can see here. As they go lower, they're going to gain a lot of these. And I think it's actually quite fun for the players. I only wanted these short-term madnesses to be, the first few levels, and then they don't happen anymore. You also have to be careful with short-term madness because you could just pass out or faint. I think that this has to be used sparingly. Also be aware of when you force players to make those sanity checks if they're going to go down to 4 and 3, the levels 4 and 3, because if it's during combat or at the start of a combat, you could end up taking that player out of the combat for the entire fight. When it comes to combats, I think if something scary were to happen at the beginning of a combat, see a terrifying monster that's charging at them, I think even realistically, their adrenaline would kick in and they would have that fight or flight response. Now again, you could say the flight response is the fear, but I think it's more just kicking them into gear. They maybe run away, but then the effect of the madness would happen after they were able to think about it and kind of revisit that image in their mind. Now once they get down to 0 sanity, the character loses all control of reality. They're effectively dead. One last thing I wanted to say is that the madness flaws here, the indefinite ones, are supposed to be permanent in the DMG. I decided to make it not so permanent for the first one, only go to the end of the next adventure, and instead of it always just being permanent. Because if they happen to get to level 2 a few times within a few sessions, they could just end up having a really hard to roleplay character. So I didn't want to make it so that they're always having these permanent madnesses put on them. All right, so now let's talk about healing sanity. So healing sanity, after a adventure is completed, the players will heal a d4 sanity points during downtime. It's a one-shot campaign, so there could be weeks or months in between each adventure. If you were doing a traditional campaign, I think you could implement long rests, would also heal a point of sanity, or you could be as generous as you wanted to, make it a d3, a d4, even a d6. But there should be some sort of element to a long rest if you're running a traditional campaign. So magical healing can also heal sanity. A calm emotion spell or similar ability will suppress the effects of a short-term or long-term madness, while lesser restoration can get rid of a short-term madness entirely. Greater restoration, again, or an equivalent type of spell or ability, can cure long-term madness, but only powerful magic like a wish spell or something really, really powerful can get rid of indefinite madness, a permanent madness.
Oh, by the way, anyone that came over the fear effect, which I think was Dobby, Brom, that was it, right? Dobby and Brom. So Brom obviously does not need to make this check, but Dobby, you need to give me another sanity check, a charisma sanity check.
Charisma, you say?
Yes, I say.
So I'm at +3, but I'm -1 charisma, so I'm going to do it with a +2.
You
I got
go
net
on
1.
another level of sanity. You are at 3 sanity, correct?
I was at 3.
Oh, so you're now at 2 sanity. So you give me another roll in the long-term madness chart, and you're going to give me another roll on a different roll on the indefinite madness chart. And this is going to last until the end of the next adventure.
If he fails one more time, is he dead?
2 more times. 2 more
times.
Oh my goodness. He's dead. So, Dobby, the first one. First D100.
Too much for Bear to handle.
88.
All right, so whenever you take damage, you're going to have to pass a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw, or you're going to be affected as though someone cast the Confusion spell on you.
Oof.
And that effect would last for 1 minute. 1 minute every time. Well, the long-term madness is you're going to have this for D10 hours. But, so roll another D10. But the 15 Wisdom save for every time you get hit, that's going to be... Yeah, so you're 1 hour. But then whenever you get hit, you're going to have to take that Wisdom saving throw to be under the Confusion spell for a minute. And then one more D100 for the Indefinite Madness. 76. So this is an Indefinite Madness. You're convinced that powerful enemies are hunting you, and their agents are everywhere. And you're pretty sure they're watching you right now.
I knew it. How long does this last?
This lasts until the end of next session. Okay?
I feel burning eyes in the back of my neck.
That you do.
Okay, so just to summarize, I use a sanity mechanic in my horror-themed campaign because I think it is good for the theme. I think it makes it a little more realistic. And because we're playing up the horror aspect, I think this kind of connects our one-shot campaign from session to session. Those lingering effects will stick with the players. Please let me know how you've run Sanity in your games, if you've used Sanity or Madness rules. Comment down below and let me know what you think about my Sanity rules and if you are going to be using them at your table. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all your support. You can check out all my live streams of games to see me implement Sanity rules. The next scheduled game for Supernatural 20 is November 22nd. We'll be playing a special session, one that I've ran many times before and I really, really enjoy, but I cannot give the name of the title yet. I don't want any of my players who are watching this to see it. I want to keep it a surprise for a little bit longer, but it is one of my favorite one-shot adventures from Dungeon Magazine. All right, everybody, I will see you on the tabletop. Bye.